All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation and Treaty 3 territory. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me via Zoom are Diane Knight and Kira Penner. And the secretary today is Crystal Harland, and the assistant is Roddy Puntania. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matter for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed and recorded and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 9 on the docket today. Mrs. Harlan, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, would you state your full name, please?
Rodrigo Pontania.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, would you stand, please? Would you please state your full name?
Trevor Smith.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
Thank you. Please be seated.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. The first property we have is 1 Killarney Avenue. So, Mr. Assessor, you can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Up next, we have file 24-3153. The roll number is 0304-237-6100. The address is 1 Killarney Avenue. The 2025 assessed value has gone out at $3,191,000. This property is labeled as a commercial strip mall. It's a 1-story building with 4 premises associated. We have an actual year built of 1973 with an effective year built of 1974. We do have the land area of 36,605 square feet and a leasable area of 8,890 square feet. On page 2, you can see the image of the subject property and its orientation in the neighborhood from the pad eye view map. On page 3, I have included the pictometry overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, you can see a south-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. On page 5, I have included Google Street View images of the subject property, so we can see the tenants that are in the strip mall and the quality of the subject property. We have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay there. We do have a sale from 2007 for $1,625,000. And we do have some property leases on file associated with the subject property. So we do have Unit 1 with a lease beginning December 1st, 2019. It's a 10-year lease, 3,340 square feet at a calculated rate of $30.90. Unit 3 has a lease beginning May 2021. It's a 6-year, 8-month lease, 1,020 square feet, and we have it at $23 net. Unit 5 began their lease August 1st, 2019. It's a 10-year lease, 1,737 square feet at $22 per square foot. And then we have Unit 8. We have that lease that began on December 15, 2013. It's a 10-year lease, 2,808 square feet, and we have that at $28 per square foot. Following that, I have included on page 7 a list of rent comparables. All of these comparables are from the same market region as the subject property. They're strip malls and they are designated as a C2 or commercial space. And we do have leases that begin, I believe the oldest lease is from 2016 and up. And then we also have leasable areas ranging from 836 square feet at the lower end to 3,100 square feet at the higher end. We have effective years ranging from 1981 up to 2006. And we do have rental rates ranging from, I believe it's $18.50 at the lower end up to $33 at the higher end. On page 8, I do have an income stream for the subject property under review. So we can see the first tenant there. We do have that labeled as a C0 fast food, 3,340 square feet for $27.75 per square foot. We have another units premise 917, and that has 1,045 square feet at $23.61. Premise 918, we have that listed as 1,665 square feet at $22.58, sorry. And premise 919, we have that listed at 2,840 square feet at $21.45. That brings us to a total potential rent of $215,871. A total area of 8,890 square feet. And that gives us a blended rate on the subject property of $24.28 per square foot. From there, we do go into the subject's income stream. So we have a 4% vacancy associated, 3% expenses, a $9 shortfall. That brings us to a net operating income of $197,819. And then we have a cap rate applied of 6.2%, which brings us to our value of $3,191,000. On page 9, I have included an income value summary of the subject property, so we can see all of the information that I just spoke of there summarized. On page 10, we do have our cap rate information provided, so we can see under the retail column, or under the retail row, sorry, if we look at strip for strip malls, we do have a 20th and 80th percentile for the city of Winnipeg's cap rate information from 5.6 to 6.75. And then we have our outside sources for Colliers of 6 to 7% for their cap rate information. CBRE has 6 to 7% as well. And Cushman and Wakefield has 6.5 to 7.5%. From there on page 11, I do have the pertinent Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 12, and taking us to the end of the brief, I do have the subject's income and expense information. And so if we take a look at the subject's income and expense information, we do have $243,504 of declared rental income, and it has been declared as net for income type. We do have all 3 vacancies that are being displayed, so we can have further confirmation that the rental income declared is a net rate. The expenses appear reasonable. We do have 8,905 square feet total. And then if we take the expenses to the total rent received net, and then we divide that by the area that's being declared, it does give us a blended rate of $27.35. And then on page 13, we do have the lease information for the subject property. And we already went over all of that information when the brief presented the subject's actual lease information. I believe that was on page 6, I want to say. On page 6, that's correct, where we do have all the actual information there. And I believe that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
Ms. Penner?
And no questions for me, thank you.
Okay, I have no questions, so Mr. Smith, you can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, we're looking for confirmation of the subject property. And I would note there's a couple of other properties on here that we're also seeking the same confirmation. So if that's helps us with time, just to let you know that in advance.
Okay, can you detail which properties are there? Then I'll ask Mr. Pontney and not to, well, just to give us the basic data then.
Sure. So number one, Killarney was the first, 3605 Roblin. And 836 St. Mary's. And 2539 Main Street.
Okay. Okay, are there, Mr. Pontney, do you have any questions of Mr. Smith?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, any questions from the panel with Mr. Smith?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will go on to the next property, which is 3605 Roblin.
Okay, just opening it up now.
Yeah, let me just do the same.
Sure.
All right.
Okay, so I'll just quickly go through the presentation then, as we're basically just confirming these values. Up next, we do have file 24-4012. The roll number is 0100-142-0500. The address is 3605 Roblin Boulevard. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $2,561,000. This is a one-story building, 7 premises, and we do have 12,089 square feet associated. On page 2, you can see the pad eye view image of the subject property. On page 3 is the pictometry overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, we can see a south-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5, we do have the Google Street View images of the subject property. We have received requests for income and expense information. We do have a sale on the subject property from 2012 for $1,411,250. My market data is for strip malls, and they are designated as C2 spaces as well as C4. So I have some restaurants and some commercial spaces there, and it's from the same market region as the subject property. Following that, on page 9, we do have the income stream for the subject property. We can see the total potential rent of $173,996. Total area 12,089 square feet. We do have model parameters of 4% vacancy, 3% expense, $9 shortfall. And then the net operating income of $158,786 is capitalized by a 6.2% rate, which gives us the assessed value of $2,561,000. I have an income value summary showing on page 10. On page 11 is my cap rate information. On page 12 is the municipal assessment at excerpts. And then on page 13 and 14 is the subject's income and expense mailer information. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Benner, any questions?
No questions for me, thank you.
Ms. Knight?
No, sir.
Okay, Mr. Smith, you can begin your presentation then.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we're looking for confirmation of the assessment.
All right, any questions on that, Mr. Pontanilla?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the panel on that?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. Then we will move on to 293 there, and I understand this is going to be fully heard.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
the applicant submitted some evidence this morning, and I've placed it in your OneDrive folders.
Okay, is that what's the nature of the evidence? Is it um
I believe it's an adjustment of the value.
May I respond, Mr. Chair?
sure, go ahead.
I have increased my value upon reflection of what was initially submitted.
Okay, so you've moved closer to the assessor's value then?
That's correct.
All right. Mr. Pontanilla, do you have any difficulty receiving the late evidence?
No, I received the evidence and I'm okay to proceed if the panel is okay as well.
Okay, I believe we need to take a very quick recess for the panel to consider whether we accept the evidence or not.
Okay.
So if we can have a very short break, we will come back very quickly, I would assume. All right, thank you very much. So we will go to 293 there, and we will accept the new evidence. The board has deliberated and will accept the new evidence. So, Mr. Pontanilla, on 293 Narren Avenue.
Okay, thank you. All right. So up next we have file 24-3999. The roll number is 1410-012-2410. The address is 293 Nairn Avenue. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $1,174,000. This property is designated as a strip mall. It does have 6 premises associated, 1 building record, and there's 2 stories associated with the subject property. The actual year built and effective year built are both 1978. And we do have 11,384 square feet for the land area, and we have a leasable area of 8,337 square feet. On page 2, I have included the pad eye view image of the subject property. On page 3, I have included the overhead view of the subject property, and we can see its location in the neighborhood on the corner of Nairn Avenue and Stadacona Street. On page 4, we can see a south-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. On page 5, we do have the Google Street View images of the subject property, as well as on page 6. On page 7, we have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay there. And we do have a sale on the subject property from 2014 for $1.1 million. I have included some rent comparable information. These rent comparables are all strip malls. They're all C2 designations, and they are all within the same market region as the subject property. And then we can see the leases. The oldest lease that we have showing for the rents is from 2017. In terms of area, we do have leasable areas ranging from, I believe it's 956 square feet at the lower end, up to 4,096 square feet at the higher end. We do have effective years ranging from 1974, I believe, at the lower end, up to 1987 at the higher end. And then we do have rents ranging from $13 at the lower end up to $24 at the higher end. Taking a look now at the subject's income valuation stream, we do have 6 premises associated with the subject property. The first premise is designated as a C4 restaurant. We have 1,180 square feet at $13.74 per square foot. Following that, we have a C2 premise at 1,562 square feet at $12.09 per square foot. We do have the following premise at 1,771 square feet at $9.41 per square foot. 2,008 square feet at $8.84 per square foot. 1,134 square feet at $9.83 per square foot. And finally, we have 682 square feet at $10.32 per square foot. That brings us to a total potential rent of $87,699. And if we divide that by the total area, 8,337 square feet, we do have a blended rate for the subject property at $10.52 per square foot. From there, we do have model parameters of 4% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $9 shortfall, which takes us to a net operating income for the subject property of $78,664. And then we have capitalized that net operating income by 6.70%, which brings us to our assessed value for 2025 of $1,174,000. On page 11, I do have a summary of the information that I've just provided. On page 12, I do have the cap rate information that I have included in the brief. And we can see once again strip malls and the range of cap rates that we have there for the 20th and 80th percentile, both for the city of Winnipeg as well as the 3 major outside sources that we use. On page 13, we do have Municipal Assessment Act excerpts that we include. And then on page 14, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense information. And if we take a look at the subject's income and expense information, we do have 2022. The mailer does list net as income type. We do have $72,326.79 of total rent that's being declared. There is a school tax rebate listed. We have no recoveries listed, so we just have the rent provided. The expenses appeared reasonable for the most part. We have 10,000 square feet that has been given as the total area for the subject property, and we have 5 tenants provided. We do have some capital costs incurred for a firewall in 2022 for $14,473.97.
Oh, can we just take a brief break? The repairman wants to talk to me.
Oh, sure.
So, very brief break. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Pontier, you can continue.
Okay, so I believe I had left off at we were talking about the subject property's income and expense information. So just a quick recap, just so we're all on the same page. 2022 mailer does list net as income type. They do have $72,326.79 of total rent that's being declared. They have a school tax rebate listed, but they have not included any recoveries on the recovery lines. And then they have 10,000 square feet being listed and 5 tenants occupying the spaces. We have a firewall capital cost that was incurred in 2022 for $14,473.97. There was no lease information given under the tenant verification section. We only have areas and rents to work with. As well, all All of the leases do have net lease checked off in the under the net lease column. And so we have unit 201. We do have that tenant listed at 760 square feet at it looks to be $800 a month or 9,600 annual rental value, which equals out to $12.63. Unit 202 has 960 square feet at $1,287.50 or $15,450 of annual rental value. Unit 203 has 1,102 square feet at $1,472.63 or $17,671.56 of annual rental value, which equals out to $15.78. Unit 204, we have it listed at 1,440 square feet at $1,536 a month or $18,432 of annual rental value, which equals out to $12.80 per square foot. Unit 205, we do have that at 1,005 square feet at $1,235 monthly or $14,820 of annual rental value, which equals out to $14.75. And so, yeah, I did some calculations with the total annual rental value declared there. And we do have the total annual rental value. If we use the tenant verification section, it comes out to $75,973.56. And then from there, we can sort of go down the stream to, depending on how the areas are being declared. It was a little unclear, the areas compared to what the city records have. So if going from there was a little harder to go with, to do some further analysis, but that's about all the income and expense information I could gather from the 2022 mailer. And I believe that takes me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have just a couple of questions. So just to confirm, so the subject property 293 Nairn was say a two-story building built in 1978.
I believe that's correct.
And the capitalization rate for this particular property, according to the city's model, is 6.7%.
That's correct.
Correct? Okay. And when I look at page 11, moving on to capitalization rate. So this is the city's standard chart noting the 20th to 80th percentile in the outside commercial brokerage sources. I get my question is, I guess there's no direct capitalization rate evidence with regard to individual sales that's being presented by the city in this cycle. Is that correct?
I mean, these cap rates that are generated are all model driven. So these are model driven cap rates that are being calculated.
Right, so they're model driven, okay, but there's no individual transactions that are available to look at.
I mean, we don't have a sale for within that up to the reference period, if that's what you're asking for the subject property, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
So I guess I'm just trying to correctly formulate it, I guess. What I'm asking is the city isn't presenting any capitalization rate evidence with regard to individual transactions that occurred in the marketplace in this cycle. Is that correct?
The cap rate information is what we have provided in the brief.
Okay, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Knight, any questions?
Referring to the chart on page 13, you came up saying that page 15, I think it is. You came up saying that the total rent was $75,975.56. What does that make it per square foot?
Well, see, that's where it gets complicated because there's different areas. Like, for example, you'll notice that if you add up the areas that are being
Yeah.
provided, we
They
have,
don't
so
equal.
that's why I didn't really get into that part because it's a little muddied, but I calculated, I can give it to you. For example, 75,973.56, that was the total annual rental value
Yeah.
using the tenant verification information. If you add up the areas there, you get a total area of 5,285 square feet. So
Okay.
then if you take those two values and you put the 75,973.56 and you divide it by 5,285 square feet, it gives us a blended rate of $14.38 per square foot. But that
Okay.
doesn't really tell the whole story because on page
No.
1, they did put 10,000 square feet.
Right.
So if you do the math using 10,000, then you get $7.60, which is well below any
Right.
kind of market average or market rates that would be for the neighborhood, in my opinion.
Okay.
So that's why that information, it is useful, but up to a point. And then from there, it's a little murky as to try to really extract a proper blended rate.
Yeah.
So I'm only kind of working with the information provided.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Ms. Penner, any questions?
Thank you. Just one, I was just curious about it being a two-story building. Is there a distinction between main floor tenants and second floor tenants?
Yes, I believe there is. And I believe before I speak, if you just give me 1 second to just confirm here. Yes, so you'll notice that some of the premises, like for example, premise 18,362, we have that on the second floor. And so we have that at $9.41. We do have premise 291,131. That's also listed on the second floor. We have that at $9.83 per square foot. And then we have premise 301,028. That's also on the second floor. And then we have that at $10.32 per square foot, which for a second floor premise might seem perhaps a little high, but then when you look at the square footage of 682 square feet, you'll notice that there's an economy of scale taking place there. So $10.32 for 682 square feet. But those premises that I gave you, those are all premises on the second floor. So we can see the model is distinguishing between first floor rates that are in the double digits and then second floor rates that are in the single digits.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Okay, Ms. Penner kind of stole my question here. I was going to ask, are there any second floor rent comparables that you have on page 8?
For my market data, I have these are all first floor. From my understanding, they're all first floor comparable rental rates. But with that being said, they are all in the double digits as well. So it's not really a justification for the second, as the second is already in single digits. So it's already kind of adjusted for from that perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Smith, you can begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think where I'll begin is in my addenda. So if everybody could flip to what is probably labeled as page 17 in your brief, it's my A-2. It's the first page of the addenda, the income and expense questionnaire that was submitted by the property owner,
Okay.
their employee. So, and this is a critical part to look at for our valuation here today. So page 17 actually doesn't list it, but if you look on the following page, 18, you can see who the income and expense questionnaire was completed by, and it's by an employee of bclean.com. Now, the owner of bclean.com is the owner of the property. He has a single investment property. This is it. It's because it's close to their headquarters. Is why they acquired it essentially. And I would not paint them as sophisticated investors, I guess. So when we look at the income and expense questionnaire, page number 17, yes, they have checked off net. Unquestionably, they have done so. They have done so in error, however. If you go down the page, you can see that there are no recoveries of any kind, either property tax, utilities, general administrative recoveries. There are no recoveries from the tenants indicated whatsoever. The total income is simply the rent plus a school tax rebate that was offered at that time frame. So there are no recoveries of the expenses from the tenant. So what we actually have are gross rents. And to confirm this, if you flip forward to page, well, I'm not sure what page it is. It's probably number 19, where the tenancies are listed. You can see that no recoveries are indicated as well. I did ask the question of the property owner, and they did indicate that they are on gross leases there. So that is a confusing aspect. I will grant you, I've spoken to them about it, and ideally they will correct that for any future submissions that they supply to the city, so that there's no confusion over net versus gross. But what that means, obviously, is that the actual net rates that they receive are significantly different than what is paid as the gross amount as listed in the income and expense questionnaire. So that's just something I wanted to clear up to start with. Let's jump back and begin in the normal spot. 293 Nairn. So where is this property? We're looking at if you drive down Higgins through Point Douglas and over the Louise Bridge, that's at the foot of the bridge, essentially, is exactly where this particular property is, on the north side corner of Nairn. Obviously, if you head, you can get there from other locations as well, but that identifies specifically where the property is. It is a two-story structure, which is unusual in the market and does pose challenges for leasing of second floor space. Traditionally, second floor space can be considerably harder to lease, certainly for retail uses and often for office uses as well. It's difficult to draw tenants to spaces like this. You don't have elevator access. You have stairs that need to be gone up in order to access the space, etc. It's simply not a property type that is in demand. Now, looking at the building itself, it was built in 1978, and well, that's not old. It is certainly well worn, I guess, is how I would describe the subject property. All of that comes into play with the amount of rent that the subject property is able to generate. So let's flip forward. My page number 2 gives you my initial valuation of 841,000. I have corrected this as noted earlier. I did submit a revised valuation. I had a second look at the rental rates that I applied to the property and increased them appropriately. So our final market value for the subject property is 941,000, and I'll walk you through that when we get to the income valuation. Page number 3 gives you background on the property, built in 1978. You have the site area there and the actual leasable area of 8,337 square feet. Then we have a couple of exterior photos. I'm not sure why we didn't include the interior photos, which would give you a better description of some of the units, especially the second floor. And the site is shown on page number 5 at the corner of Nairn. Page number 6 gives you the location. Again, just over the bridge there. And we can skip forward into the valuation of the property itself. So as described, the in-place rents are gross. So we went through the exercise of reducing them to the net rental rate by deducting the per square foot operating costs and taxes from the gross rental rate to establish what the net is that the owner would achieve. So if you look at the chart on page number 9, the top chart, you can see the net rental rates there. Well, to start with, our gross rental rates range between a low of $12.63 a square foot up to a high of $15.78 per square foot, with obviously ones in between. The resulting net rental rate is a range between a low of $3.39 a square foot to a high of $6.85 per square foot net. Now, that is what's being achieved at the property. We do recognize that obviously this is below market essentially, or it is what they're able to achieve in the market, but it's not. We can't validly base a market value upon those resultant net rental rates, given the lowness of those actual net rental rates. It's simply not appropriate and would produce a misleading value. So we're not relying upon what the actual net resultant rental rates are in the property, but we are pointing out that that is what's being achieved. So your actual net annual income would be, as noted in the chart, $27,141. Which is an average of $514. Again, we're not going to rely on that, but it is what the property is actually achieving. So what would be appropriate for the property? Now, at the bottom of the page, you can see my initial valuation of the property. I applied $10 per square foot to the main floor space and $8 per square foot to the second floor space. Now, excuse me. I have since reviewed that information a bit further. I think that was perhaps a touch on the low side. So I've increased the second floor space to $9 per square foot and the main floor space to $11 per square foot. Now, they're not actually achieving those rates, but for the purposes of our evaluation, we feel that's a more appropriate level to base a market value on for the subject property. So again, those rates were $11 for the main floor and $8 for the second floor, or rather $9 for the second floor. Skipping forward, are these appropriate rates for the market? Well, on page number 10, we've given you a chart of market lease comparables. These are all main floor space in typically street front strip malls, or rather strip malls on main thoroughfares throughout the city. You can see that they are all in that area range for the units of 1,000 to 3,000 square feet. So very similar to the property in that way. The ages vary somewhat. There's some newer ones. There's a lot that are in the same time frame as the subject. And the start dates obviously have some variability as well, but typically carry through the valuation date and are indicative of fair market value for leases. So our range of value in terms of lease rates is a low of $10.25 per square foot for a lease starting in 2018 for 271 Grassy, a newer property, a little over 3,000 square feet there, up to a high of $14 per square foot, that being 836 St. Mary's. 1,290 square feet, built in 1971, very well located, 2022 lease, so very new, $14 per square foot. Certainly a superior property to the subject that we're looking at here today. The second one on that page, also in 2022, 121 St. Anne's, very well located. Built in 77, so very similar to the subject in terms of age, size, 1,725 square feet, 5-year term, starting in 2022, $10.97 per square foot. So we can go further down the list. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on those, but again, if you look at the locations of them, these are all typically well-located strip malls throughout the city, and our range is typically in that $10 to 11, call it 11 plus per square foot is typically what we're seeing. The subject would be, in my opinion, inferior to the lease comparables that we're presenting to you here. So based on this analysis, we feel that a main floor rate of $11 a square foot and $9 for the second floor is perhaps a touch optimistic, but we feel is appropriate for determining a market value for the subject. So that gives us a potential annual income of $80,713, which is on the page that was submitted with the revised valuation for you. So let's skip forward into the expenses. The subject property, as of the valuation date, had a vacancy of 3,052 square feet. This represents 37% of the leasable area of the property. This is particular property, as I mentioned, it's 2-story. They typically do have a chronic vacancy issue with space on the second floor being quite difficult to lease, as well as some issues on occasion on the main floor. When we look at the Johnson report for strip center vacancy, they note 3.8% vacancy at year-end 2022 being the average for the city, overall retail vacancy of 3.3%. Now, how do we address this? You obviously can't use 37% vacancy and establish a market value based on that. So what we're doing in our valuation is deferring to the city of Winnipeg's 4% vacancy allowance that has been provided. And consistent with both appraisal and assessment theory, we're dealing with that increased vacancy in the selection of the capitalization rate. The expense allowance, I'm not going to run through this in detail. We've all heard it extensively. There has been a case that has been heard before the municipal board for 444 St. Mary, which was essentially a test case with regard to the non-recoverable allowance issue, which we're all quite familiar with. It was gone through in detail. Numerous experts were called and reports presented, and ultimately they arrived at a decision that was in the neighborhood of between 4.5% and 5% for that particular property. So we have applied a 5% allowance for the expense allowance, consistent with the decision of the municipal board. Our shortfall allowance, we are in agreement with the city, so no change there. And we can skip forward to the capital.
Can we take a short break here? The my wife's personal care home is calling me, so I gotta take this call.
I'm going to take us offline.
All right, thank you very much. Again, I apologize for the interruption. Mr. Smith, you were in your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think our broadcast is.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we just lost the camera in our boardroom. I have to go back and see if I can get it back.
Okay.
Just a
All
moment,
right.
please. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Pardon us for the interruptions. Mr. Smith, you were on the expenses, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I had just wrapped up my discussion about the expenses and was about to move on to capitalization rate. So that begins on page number 13. For everybody there.
Yes.
So capitalization rate, always a critical part in determining market value for assessment. Let's look at the commercial brokerage market for their particular stats that they have published as of the valuation date. When we look at Cushman and Wakefield, they state a capitalization rate range of 6.5% to 7.5% for non-anchored retail strip malls, 6.5 to 7.5%. When we look at Colliers, they simply have an overall retail capitalization rate range of 6% to 7% for what they term investment grade retail assets, which is really the same for Cushman and Wakefield as well, including CBRE if we had them in here. But these market participants are essentially looking at quality investment grade retail assets, well leased, well located, good demand for those products in terms of tenants looking for space, good visibility, good parking, all of the features that you would be looking for. So more or less the peak of the market, and those are the ranges that they're presenting: 6.5 to 7.5 for non-anchored retail strip malls, and 6 to 7% for an overall retail cap rate range. Again, that's the peak of the market that they're looking at. Now, we have done our own analysis of some individual sales in the market, and we present that information in the chart on page number 13. So again, these are all well-located strip malls in the city. They vary throughout the city, but they're again all typically on main thoroughfares with good visibility, good parking, good tenancy, good demand, etc. So let's look at what we have. We have a transaction on Henderson Highway from 2021. Traded at a cap rate of 8.9%. You can see a photo of that property at the bottom of the page. Number 2, Pembina Highway, 2021 sale as well. Capitalization rate of 6.3%. Both of those are over $3 million. Number 3, Portage Avenue sale, also in 2021. This is capitalization rate of 6.5%. Then we have sale in the heart of Osborne Village, corner of Stradbroke and Osborne. It is a retail strip mall. You can see a photo of it on that same page at the bottom. Transacted in 2018 at a cap rate of 7.5%. And then finally, we have a property on Corridon Avenue in the River Heights area on the way to Tuxedo. Again, a retail strip mall, sold in 2019 at a capitalization rate of 7.0%. There is a photo of that particular property on page number 14. So you can see that it's relatively newly constructed and bit of a boutique retail strip mall with higher end tenancies. So that is our chart. So we're looking at a low of 6.3% up to a high of 8.9% with the bulk of the properties in that 6.5 to 7.5% capitalization rate range, mirroring essentially what the commercial brokerages are providing with regard to their capitalization rate ranges for the same product. So what would be appropriate for the subject property? Well, the city has applied a 6.7% capitalization rate to the subject property. That would be towards the low end of the range, certainly. What do we have? We have property built in 1978. I would say it's not in the most ideal location at the foot of the Louise Bridge there. It is, well, built in 1978, and it is a bit tired and worn. It has a chronic vacancy issue that is ongoing. As of the valuation date, they had 37% vacancy. And that again is an ongoing issue. We also have a property that is generating gross rental rates, not net rental rates. So changing that is quite involved and is not a snap of the fingers kind of thing. That would involve quite a bit of expenditure and getting the tenants on side and or getting new tenants essentially in order to do that. Now, what would the demand for tenants at market rental rates in other areas of the city be for that particular location? It would be lower, I would argue. I think that's fairly evident looking at what they're able to achieve there. So taking all of these points into account, we have applied what we would see as typically towards the upper end of the capitalization rate range, not the upper end, but towards it at 7.5%. Now, my initial valuation is shown on page 14, but I believe you probably all have my revised valuation page. I'll just confirm that you do.
Yep, we do.
Okay, so the revised valuation page summarizes that detail. 80,713 in potential rental income. You can see the other parameters, NOI of 70,609, capped at 7.5%, gives us $941,000 in market value. And again, this is, yes, this is a property built in 1978 in the location that it's in. So that is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, questions, Mr. Pontanilla?
Just a couple. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Smith, on page 10 of your brief showing your market leasing activity, so your rental rate comparisons, are any of the comparable rents used near the subject?
No, not specifically. In fact, there's not a lot of retail in that particular area. It's slightly more industrial with some quasi-commercial.
Okay. And have you inspected the property at all?
I myself have not done the specific walkthrough of this particular property, but I'm speaking with my colleague that has done it for many years. We do have photos of the interior and of the second floor. So I have seen what it's like, but I didn't have the opportunity to inspect it.
Okay. And in terms of the vacancy that you spoke of, what can you tell us about the current use? Is the space there vacant as of the reference period? I guess you were saying it was vacant, correct?
Yes, that was the indication that I had, that as of the valuation date that there was that was the vacancy.
Okay. And then are the owners attempting to remedy this, as far as you're aware, by improving the space and advertising the vacant space?
It is certainly advertised for lease. In fact, if you look at the cover page of the brief, you can see that it's advertised out front of the property itself. But I believe they do go beyond that and make it more widely available so that the general public can see it.
Okay.
And generally, you don't upgrade the space until you have the tenant, because typically there's individual requirements.
Okay. And then heading over to page 13 of your brief, I'll give you a chance to get there, or a moment to get there.
Yeah.
In terms of your market capitalization rate studies, so the cap rates that you're providing, are any of these sales near the subject property?
No, again, they're not in the immediate area of the subject. I would again state that they would all be considered superior to the subject property.
And then how were the net operating incomes determined for the extracted cap rates that you used?
We determine the capitalization rates according to appraisal theory using the same methodology that is appropriate for assessment.
I understand that. So then these net operating incomes would have been specific to the sales that are being shown?
Yes, they're specific to the sales that are shown, yes.
Okay. And can you tell us the sizes of the indexes that you have there? I noticed there's no sizes beside any of these sales.
Size in terms of square
Just
footage?
yeah,
Or...
the overall size in terms of square footage for these sales that you provided in your cap rate study.
No, I'm afraid I don't actually have that detail with me here today, and I didn't include it in the chart. I mean, I'm not going to quote sizes, but they're relatively standard size strip malls throughout the city.
Okay, and did you happen to be, are you happen to, sorry, did you happen to know the age of the buildings or the quality of the buildings that you use there for your cap rate?
Yes, I do know that I do know the quality of them. All of them are quality centers, well located on major thoroughfares. Do I have the ages noted down here today? No. We can get into excessive detail sometimes in going through these hearings, so sometimes I keep it slightly briefer. So I have not included that particular detail. We're not hiding that information. In fact, we have some photos of them there for the panel to see.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Penner, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking on page 13 at your cap rate comparables, is there anything you can tell us about index 1 in terms of the cap rate is quite a bit higher than any of the other properties?
Yes, it is somewhat higher than the other ones. There is a certain element of confidentiality with regard to the capitalization rates, or I have shown a photo of the particular property there on the bottom of page 13. There were a few non-standard issues, I believe, that caused the capitalization rate to be somewhat higher, that had to be reflected in the sale price.
Okay, thank you. And regarding the subject property and the existing leases, do you have any information on where those leases are in their term? Are any of them coming up for renewal? Are they long-term tenants? Anything of that nature?
Right. I'm afraid that I don't have a rent roll with more detail than what has been included in the income and expense information in the brief here. But I can tell you that a few of the tenants have been longer term, such as the private investigator on the second floor. The pharmacy has been there for a little while, I believe. But they do have some itinerant tenants. There's the Five Spice restaurant. I'm not sure how long they've been there, frankly. So I'm afraid I don't have a start and end dates for the particular tenancies.
And then I just had one last question. You had pointed out that there was a for lease sign on the property. Do you know at all what the asking rate was for that space?
I'm afraid I don't have the asking rate. That would be, and I don't have it as of the valuation date, certainly. They continue to operate on a gross lease basis, though, again. So if they were asking, say, $15 or $16, your net would be in the range that we're showing if they were able to achieve that gross figure.
Thank you very much. That was all for
Thank
me.
you.
Okay, Ms. Knight.
My question was asked and answered. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to deal a little bit with the expenses here. I've read that decision on St. Mary's, and that was very much a site-specific calculation of what the non-recoverables would be, which may not apply to any other site. Um, uh, I guess, do you have any calculation of the non-recoverables on this particular property?
I'm afraid I don't have information beyond what has been supplied in the income and expense information. As a as a gross rental property, all of the expenses would be borne by the property owner. So in that sense, certainly all of the non-recoverables are non-recoverable to the owner. With regard to and I'll be brief about this, but with regard to the municipal board decision that I referred to, we run into these larger issues at the board of revision that become a point of contention and then get appealed to the municipal board and and ultimately we all wait on the one case that essentially becomes the test case to come out, giving us some guidance on these particular issues. And obviously the non-recoverable has been an issue for the last 2 cycles, now 3, as the city has changed their modeling with regard to that. The appellants and their agents have gone to great lengths to explain and back up their detail. We've had to appeal many cases to the municipal board. And essentially this 444 St. Mary, while not designated a test case as such, it was the first one to get into that in great detail. I know the appellant's agents, Altus, did a very large amount of work and called in experts, expert witnesses, etc., with regard to that particular issue. So it was very well heard and exercised. And while, you know, there are no other cases referred to in that decision, it does point towards the non-recoverable issue being more on the side of the agents and the appellants and higher than certainly than the city's 2 or 3% that was designated in the last number of cycles. So beyond that, there's no real ability to give you further information at this time, as that is the single case that has been dealt with. And again, for the subject property, all expenses are borne by the property owner.
Okay, and one further question. It's on, I guess, your verbiage on page 11. You are including leasing commissions and tenant inducements in your non-recoverables, which again, the St. Mary decision was very clear on that they're not to include leasing commissions and tenant inducements. So does your 5% include that?
No, we modified our expectation from 7% and above to the 5% that we've indicated in the brief here today. So well, according to appraisal theory, those items that are listed are all intended to be considered in non-recoverable expenses. We do recognize that the rate that it was applied was lower for particular reasons. So the 5% is more appropriate.
All right. I have no more questions then, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on, since we had a number of interruptions already. Let's move on to 686 Springfield Road.
I think that one has already been dealt with, Mr. Chair. We've reached an agreement on that particular
Oh.
property.
Oh, okay. Do we have that agreement on file?
I think we do, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so
On that.
that's a 15-1 agreement then?
Yes.
All right. Then we'll do 145 St. Anne's Road. All right, so I'll just open the files. Okay, Mr. Potney on St. Anne's Road then.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So up next, we have file 24-3139. The roll number is 0800-134-6000. The address is 145 St. Anne's Road. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $1,478,000. Once again, we're speaking about a strip mall property type. We have one building record associated, 3 premises associated with the subject property, and it's a 1-story building. The actual year built and effective year built are listed as 1980. The land area is 11,430 square feet, plan area 5,971 square feet, and the total leasable area is 5,971 square feet. On page 2, I have included in a pad eye view image of the subject property. And then on page 3, I have included an overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, I have included a north-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. And on page 5 and 6, I have included the Google Street View images from the 2023 map overlay. We have received income and expense information, so we're okay there. We do have a sale for the subject property from 2015 for $775,000. For rent comparables, I have included rent comparables that are within the same market region as the subject property. These are all strip mall comparables for lease information. And we do have leases showing as old as 2018, so 2018 and up. We have areas that vary from approximately 1,000 square feet at the lower end up to 3,033 square feet at the higher end. We have effective years ranging from 1967 at the lower end up to 1990 at the higher end. And then we have some rents ranging from, looks to be about $14.50 at the lower end, up to approximately $20 at the higher end. And now for the subject property itself, we do have 3 premises associated, as previously mentioned. We have a C4 standard restaurant for the first premise, 1,771 square feet at $16.92 per square foot. The following premise is 1,100 square feet. It's a C4 restaurant as well, and we have that at $17.71 per square foot. And then finally, we have a C2 standard finish premise at 3,100 square feet at $14.49. That brings us to a total potential of $94,365, which if we divide by the total area of 5,971 square feet, it gives us a blended rate for the subject property of $15.80 per square foot blended. From there, we have the model parameters of 4% vacancy, a 3% expense rate, and a $9 shortfall per square foot, which brings us to a net operating income of $85,722. And then we do have a modeled cap rate of 5.8%, which brings us to a total value of $1,478,000. On page 11, I have included an income value summary of the information that was just spoken about. On page 12, we do have our cap rate tables showing our cap rate information. On page 13, I have included Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 22, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense mailer information. So we can have a bit of a closer look at that. So the 2022 mailer does list net as income type. $50,274.19 was the total rent received. We do have common area maintenance and property tax recoveries listed at the bottom, but no general admin recoveries listed. The expenses do appear reasonable for the subject property. We have 5,881 square feet total. And then we have 3 tenants listed. And then from there, we have no capital costs that are showing for the subject property. And then it takes us to the page 15 of my brief, which shows the tenant verification information. So we'll note unit 145, we have it listed as we have it listed as a restaurant. And we do have the lease from 2016 to 26. And that's for 1,731 square feet at $1,694.96, or a total annual rental value of $20,339.52, which equals out to $11.75 net. Unit 147, we have another restaurant there, a lease from 2022 to 32, so a 10-year lease, 1,117 square feet at $1,303.17 per month, or $15,638.04 annual rental value, which equals out to $14 net. And then we do have unit 149. I believe that's the commercial unit. We have that as a lease from 2022 to 26 for 3,033 square feet at $2,906.63, or $34,879.56 of annual rental value, which equals out to $11.50 net. And I was able to calculate a little bit of a discrepancy here. So on page 1 of the mailer, which would be page 14 of my brief, you'll note that the rental income that's being provided is declared as $50,274.19. But if you calculate the annual rental value from page 2 of the mailer or page 15 of my brief, if we calculate and add up the annual rental value from every lease that I had calculated, we actually get a total annual potential rent calculated of $70,857.12. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy between the two values that are being declared. And so if we do the useful price per square foot blended rate analysis to get a better idea, on page 1, if we take the declared rent received and we divide that by the area, we get a blended rate of $8.55, which seems very low for the subject property. But then if we take the calculated annual rental value of $70,857.12 and divide that by the total area, we get a blended rate of approximately $12.05 per square foot. And so I just wanted to provide both of those for context. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the valuation, so I guess page 9 and or page 10 are the same, really. This is all model driven, correct? There's no overrides for this particular property?
That's correct.
Okay. And this particular property, pretty standard strip mall, built in 1980, and the capitalization rate for this one is 5.8%.
That's correct.
Okay, and our prior property was built in 1978 and had a 6.7% capitalization rate, correct?
That's correct. Yes, there is context. There are different neighborhoods, different sizes, but if we're looking strictly at cap rates, correct.
And that was model driven as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when I look at the City of Winnipeg chart for capitalization rates on page 11, the 5.8 that the model has projected is essentially at the low end of your cap rate structure, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Ms. Benner?
No, thank you. I'm good.
Okay, just following up on the cap rate, what would put this, well, not quite at 20th percentile, but certainly close to it. What factors would put it that low?
So this would be a model-driven cap rate that was generated. So there are factors that go in, like the size of the building. You'll note that the previous subject that we spoke about was, I think it was north of 8,000 square feet, close to about 9,000 square feet, whereas this one is just under 6,000 square feet. So the sizes are different. The neighborhood is also different. This property that we're talking about on St. Anne's Road is quite different in terms of neighborhood characteristics from the previous appeal that we spoke of on Nairn. So there are factors that go in like that, which would then influence the cap rate that's being generated from the model.
All right, thank you. Mr. Smith, you can begin your presentation then.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess to begin with, I'd just like to address one issue that was brought up by the assessor there. Looking at the first page of my addenda, which would be page 17, I guess, for you guys on the computer. This is the income and expense questionnaire, and it had been noted that it stated a rental income received of somewhere north of $50,000, $50,274.19, I believe is indicated, pretty exact figure. This isn't intended to be misleading. I'm assuming that they had some vacancy during that year that was leased up, and what was collected. So it's not a projected 100% occupancy. It's actually what they had received. That would be my explanation for that particular figure. So we're certainly not relying on a net rental rate of $8.50 or whatever that would produce, because that would certainly be inaccurate. So let's skip forward to the property itself. So 145 St. Anne's Road, located in St. Patel. And one thing to note up front here, I think, is that when we do look at the leases in place and whether they're at market value, two of them were struck in 2022, and they're both long-term leases. So shortly before the valuation date, and they were in, we were in a period then where COVID was well known, and retail was, dealing with, was aware of the issues and how to deal with them. And I won't say we had entirely moved beyond it, but people had confidence in establishing more long-term plans at that point. So we had two leases occurring in 2022, both long-term, and they're actually supportive of the other remaining lease as well that's in place. So let's get into the property itself. So 145 St. Anne's, my page number 2 gives you some background on the property. You have your 2023 assessment, $1,478,000. This is a very significant increase from the 2023 value of $928,000, which was
If I can
a
caution
revision.
here, Mr. Smith, that we don't put any weight on past assessments.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think the point, well, I don't think, the point of providing them is for background information for the panel. I'm not comparing assessments. Comparing assessments is saying my house is valued higher than it should be because my neighbor's house is valued lesser. What we're showing is the history of the property here. So I provide the information. You can do with it as you will, certainly. That is the history of the property. It is zone C2, again, built in 1980. And we have the site area and leaseable area shown for you there. Not a great deal different in terms of size than the property we were looking at before. The difference being it doesn't have a second floor of office space, essentially. It has more main floor space. Photos begin on page number 4. The site is shown on 5. Pretty standard strip mall in St. Patel location, and the location is shown on my page number 6. So it's a little north of the Fermor intersection with St. Anne's in St. Patel. As noted, sale of the property happened in 2015 for $775,000. That was actually part of a multiple property transaction at that point in time. So I wouldn't put a huge amount of weight on it, but it did transact for that value. Let's get into the valuation itself. So on page number 9, I've provided you with the actual rent roll for the property. So we have 3 units. First one is 1,731 square feet, 10-year term, struck in 2016 with a rate of $11.75 per square foot. Then we move on to second unit, slightly smaller, 1,117 square feet, 2022 lease for a 10-year term. And this is a $14 per square foot net rent over a 10-year term. Finally, we have the last unit, 2022 year lease, over a 5-year term, slightly larger, just over 3,000 square feet for $11.50 per square foot. So 2 of those leases are done very close to the valuation date, and they are supportive of the remaining lease. So our range is between $11.50 and $14, with 2 of them under $12 per square foot, $11.50 and $11.75. So is this fair market value? Well, to start with, the property is professionally managed and leased. When vacancies come up, they're duly advertised appropriately to all of the main players in the market to generate interest. And they achieve the maximum that they're able to for the market. So if they were able to get more rent for the properties, they would do so. It's again a professionally managed property. They have quite a few properties under management in the city. That being said, what does the market say? Page 10, we have our retail comparables for you. A number of these are in the immediate area. In the St. Patel area. So if we look at our top of our chart on page 10, 836 St. Mary's, 1,290 square feet, similar age, 5-year term starting in 2022 at $14 per square foot. So similar to the one in this particular unit. Then we have 121 St. Anne's, similar age, 1977, 1,725 square feet. Again, 5-year term in 2022, just under $11 per square foot. And finally, 121 St. Anne's, 1,708 square feet, 1977, 2022, 3-year term at $13.50 per square foot. So kind of pointing directly in that range that the subject property is falling within. Beyond that, we also have have rents in very similar locations, close to the valuation date, et cetera, that give you good support for rents in that specific range that the subject is drawing, that being in the $11 to $12 per square foot range. So these are all well-located multi-tenant strip malls throughout the city on main thoroughfares. Happy to answer any questions that you may have on those, but they are essentially very supportive of the rental rates that they've been able to achieve on the property. So we believe the in-place rates are truly representative of market for all the reasons stated. So let's move forward here. I'll try and save us a bit of time. We aren't disputing the city's vacation. We aren't disputing the city's vacancy parameter of 4%. We're using 5% for the expense allowance for the reasons stated, and we're in agreement with the shortfall at $9 per square foot. Now, let's move forward to capitalization rate. So the same information is presented to you here that we've already discussed. We have Cushman and Wakefield indicating a cap rate range of 6.5 to 7.5% for, again, non-anchored retail strip malls, which the subject would fall within, for investment grade assets, and Collier's indicating a range of 6 to 7% for an overall retail cap rate. So not just strip malls, but encompassing all types of retail categories, 6 to 7%. Our own capitalization rate study ranges from 6.3% up to 8.9%, with the bulk of those being in the 6.5 to 7.5% range typically. Now, what do we have with regard to the subject property? Well, I see a typo was made in my text there. Please disregard that. We have a relatively standard strip mall, well located in St. Tell on a major thoroughfare. Nothing particularly outstanding or wrong with it. Fairly standard, but again, it is well located. There are some longer term leases in there. We would put it towards the low end of the capitalization rate range that we see in the comps that we provide. So we've used a cap rate of 6.5% in our valuation for the subject property. This is summarized on page number 14 and gives us a final market value of $962,000. Now, one thing I will point out here is, again, regarding capitalization rate, what we did see in the lead up to the April 1, 2023 valuation date is a significant jump in interest rates beginning generally in the summer of 2022. And what that instituted essentially was a freeze on sales in the marketplace. We really didn't see virtually any investment transactions in that time frame in the retail space, as obviously rising interest rates drive up the cost of borrowing and decrease the return to the investors. So both nobody was willing to pay based on the rental rate, or rather the interest rates that they would have to borrow at and what they would be able to achieve as a return. And equally, nobody was willing to sell their assets for what they didn't feel they might particularly be worth. So there were no transactions really happening in that time frame. But again, rising interest rates do not lead to decreasing cap rates. And when I look at the city's modeling between the two cycles, we see a decrease in cap rate from 6.2% to 5.8%. But we really didn't see any transactions in the market to be supportive of that particular change in modeling. that is my presentation. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Pontonia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Smith, going to your page 10, I believe that's the rental information you have for your rent rate market information.
Yeah.
I've noticed on index 4 up to index 10, are those comparables? Are they with near the subject property?
Well, the challenge, Mr. Pontonia, as you're aware, I'm sure, the challenge is always having market data that is in the immediate vicinity or identical to the subject property. We can never have identical information to present. So what we do, as the city does, is we provide the best information available, most comparable in terms of similar utility, similar location, similar size, similar lease timeframes, et cetera. So what we have are properties that are well located on major thoroughfares and in comparable malls throughout the city. We do have St. Boniface here, I see. Pembina Highway, Osborne Village, et cetera.
Okay. And would it affect the analysis if you had been using comparable data from within the neighborhood closer to the subject property to come up with a rental rate?
No, I don't believe so. We have provided information, as noted, in the immediate area that is supportive of the rental rates achieved in the property as well, if you look at the first three.
Okay. And then moving forward to page 13 for your cap rate information. I'll give you a second to get there.
Mhm.
Are any of your cap rates applicable to the subject property? And what I mean by that is, are any of these sales data points that you provided close to the subject property?
Well, so I'll just refer to my earlier answer, I guess, with regard to answering that. So location is not the one and only thing, obviously, that we look at in determining capitalization rates. What we look at is the transactions that have happened in the marketplace, what their true capitalization rates are, in order to help frame the properties that we're looking at for assessment purposes. So we look at what has happened in the market and compare that to the subject properties and make any appropriate adjustments if necessary. And the ranges that we see here, 6.5 to 7.5 typically. And our subject, as I've already noted, is a pretty standard strip mall located in St. Paul, well located. Nothing particularly wrong with it or exceptional about it. We've applied the cap rate of 6.5, which fits well with the market data that we provided.
Okay, and how about I see that you haven't provided the sizes again. Are you able to provide in the sizes for any of these data points? Would it be useful to have size to be able to compare it to the subject property a little more? Or?
Well, Mr. Pontonia, I think we probably already covered that one. I'm as I've already noted, I didn't provide that particular detail. There's no reason that I haven't provided it. The issue that we're largely looking at here with regard to capitalization rate is what was the ultimate capitalization rate. Now, if they varied between, $100 million and $1 million, I could certainly see that point, but we're looking at properties that fall between 1.5 million and 4 million here. They're all typically pretty standard strip malls throughout the city, so there's not a great deal of variability there.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay, Ms. Penner, any questions?
No questions for me, thank you.
Ms. Knight?
So again, the properties that you put for comparison, they're not in the area. Do you have anything that's in that area? Do you have anything that's closer to the value, closer to that size?
Yeah, so if we're talking, are we talking about the lease comparables?
Yeah, on page 13.
Okay, so you're looking at the capitalization rate chart
Right,
is
yeah.
what you're looking at.
I'm looking for capitalization. Yeah,
So
no?
I take your question and do I have ones that are in the St. Patel area that I can provide you? No, because there weren't any that transacted in that relative time frame. Now, what what we do and what you're intended to do in order to help frame these properties is look at what the market provides. So when we look at these properties that I've indicated here and what their relative cap rates are, you look at those and you look at them in comparison to the subject. So that one's in St. Patel, one's in Portage in rather Osborne Village. We have well located on Pembina Highway, Henderson Highway. The issue of location is simply one factor with regard to the cap rate and what is ultimately paid for it. Location is an issue with regard to demand for tenant demand in an area. So you look at how do these areas compare to the subject property? How is Pembina Highway or Henderson or Corridon in relation to the subject property in St. Patel? Is it superior? Is it inferior? Is it relatively the same? And all of the other components that you look at. So that's kind of the framework that we use.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, in terms of your lease comparables, are any of those restaurants?
I don't specifically recall if any of these were restaurants or not, I'm afraid. I know the reasoning with the question is that sometimes restaurants tend to drive a higher rental rate because of the costs of putting in kitchens, etc. If the owner bears some of that, but that can vary whether the owner invests into the space or whether the tenant does.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I have no more questions then. So our next property is 836 St. Mary's Road. On this one, has there been any agreement on this one or?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so then we'll deal with 836 St. Mary's Road. Let me just open the file then. Okay, and Mr. Smith, is this one you're requesting confirmation on?
It is.
Okay, so Mr. Potney, if you can read in the information relatively quickly then.
Sure. Okay, I'll just go over the pertinent points. So up next, we have file 24-3140. The roll number is 0800-239-1500. The address is 836 St. Mary's Road. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $1,148,000. Once again, we are speaking about a strip mall. It's a one building record, 5 premises associated. It's a one-story building. Actual year and effective year built is 1971. We have a land area of 12,628 square feet and a total leasable area of 5,858 square feet. On page 2, we can see the overhead view of the subject property from the pad eye view map. On page 3, I have the pictometry view of the overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, I have included a north-facing view and an east-facing view of the subject property. On page 5, I have included some Google Street View images of the subject property. We have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay there. We do have 2 sales for the subject property. The most recent is from 2015 for $800,000. All of my market data comparables are from within the subject's market region. They're all strip malls. And they all have leases ranging from 2016 and up. And rental rates ranging from $13 up to, or $12.50, I guess, up to $18 per square foot. The subject property has 5 premises associated. All 5 premises add up to 5,858 square feet for a total potential rent of $76,224. So as a quick understanding, we get a price per square foot of $13.01 approximately. And then from there, we have model parameters of a 4% vacancy, 3% expense, $9 shortfall, which brings us to a net operating income of $68,871, which is then capitalized by a 6% cap rate to give us a value of $1,148,000. On page 10, I have included a summary of the information provided. Page 11 has the cap rate information. Page 12 has the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And page 13, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense mailer information. And I don't think I need to go over that due to the reasons stated above. So I believe that's my presentation.
Okay, Mr. Smith, any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, Ms. Penner, any questions?
No questions for me, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Knight.
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith, your presentation, please.
We're simply asking for confirmation, please.
All right. Mr. Pani, any questions on that?
No questions, thank you.
Any questions from the panel on the confirmation?
No questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now I think we come to 3065 Ness, which as I understand is going to be in dispute. Does anybody need a quick break?
If you guys want, I can take a break, or I can keep going. I'll defer to the to what you guys want to do. Either or works for me. Actually, maybe it wouldn't be a bad thing to take a little break. Maybe for a few minutes, if that works.
Okay, it's now 5 after 3. Let's take a break till 10 after 3 then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll take us offline, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. We'll come back into session here with 3065 Ness Avenue. Mr. Pontonia, you can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Up next, we have file 24-3910. The roll number is 0743 597 0500. The address is 3065 Ness Avenue. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $1,454,000. Once again, we're speaking about a strip mall as the property type. It has 1 building record, 8 premises associated, and it's a 1-story building. Both the actual year built and effective year built are 1976. The land area is 29,822 square feet. And the total leasable area on file is 10,773 square feet. On page 2, I have included a pad eye view map of pad eye view image of the subject property. On page 3, I have included a pictometry overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, I have included a south-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. And on page 5 and page 6, I have included the Google Street View images of the subject property. We have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay there. We do have a few sales associated with the subject property as well. One of them is from very recently before the reference period of March 10th, 2021. And we do have a consideration and sworn value of $1.7 million, as well as the sale price of $1.7 million. For rent comparables, I have included rent comparables from within the same market region as the subject property. All of my rent comparables are strip malls. We have lease information going as far back as 2019, so they're all relatively new leases. We have areas ranging from 576 square feet at the lower end up to 2,560 square feet at the higher end. We do have effective years built of 1973, I believe, at the lower end, up to 1980 at the higher end. And then we do have rents that are ranging from $10 at the lower end up to $18 at the higher end. Following that is the income stream for the subject property. So you'll note we have 8 premises associated with the income stream. We have leasable areas ranging from 525 square feet at the lower end up to 2,028 square feet at the higher end. We have rents that are all model generated that are ranging from $10.05 at the lower end up to $15.28 for a 525 square foot premise at the higher end. The total leasable area is 10,773 square feet. The total potential rent provided is $121,922, which we divide that by the area, gives us approximately $11.32 per square foot. From there, we do go through the income stream, a 4% vacancy, 3% expense, $9 shortfall, which brings us to a net operating income of $109,744. From there, we have a model-driven cap rate applied of 7.55%, which brings us to our assessed value of $1,454,000. On page 11 is a summary of the information that I've provided. On page 12 is the cap rate information that we provide in our briefs. On page 13 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts that are most pertinent and are provided. And then on page 14 and 15, and taking us to the end of our brief, is the subject property's income and expense information. So we can have a little conversation about that. We do have gross checked off as the income type. $120,111.75 is the total rent that's received. As it's gross, we have no recoveries listed. So that value, that rent declared is the rent at the bottom there for total income received of $120,111.75. The expenses appear reasonable. We do have 6 tenants that are on the that are declared as tenants that are in the building. And we have 10,771 square feet as the total area listed. We do have some vacancy loss that's declared, $39,900 of some rental income loss. And then from there, we can go to the next page and start looking at the leases for the subject property. So we can begin from the very top there, and we don't have a unit associated, but we have a what looks to be a podiatry business there. The lease is from 2006 to 25 for 874 square feet at $1,166.67, or $14,000.04 of annual rental value. When you do the math on that, that takes us to a price per square foot of $16.02. Of course, this is a gross lease, so I had a calculation to have an approximate net rent approximation of $10.41 for that unit. For the next unit, it's a pharmacy. We have a lease from 2017 to 2029 for 874 square feet at $1,350 per month or $16,200 of annual rental value, which equals out to $18.54 gross. So once we do our approximation, it brings us down to approximately $12.05 for the pharmacy. Following that, we have a day spa that's listed. We have a lease from 1995, it looks like, up to 2023 for 1,654 square feet at $1,895 monthly or $22,740 annual rental value. That equals out to a value of $13.75 gross. Netting that out brings us to a rental rate approximately of $8.94. Following that, we have another business that's operating. They look to be a pole specialist. We have a lease from 2017 to 23 for 2,028 square feet at $1,645.25 or $19,743 of annual rental value. That equals out to about $9.74 gross. So we do the math on it and we get $6.34. Heritage Optical. Oh, apologies. I meant to just say the optical. Business that was up next. We have a lease from 2021 to 24 for 1,418 square feet at $2,500 monthly or $30,000 of annual rental value.
I hate to interject, but may I interject, Mr. Chair?
On what's your point?
Well, none of this information is included in the brief that we're looking at here today. It's all new information. The rules state that the information to be discussed is what's included in the report. So I don't dispute that Mr. Pontanilla has done this work and so forth, but it's not been provided to the panel or the appellant. It's not specific to this particular property or this assessor or anything really. It's more of a general statement that this happens more and more frequently where in this format where we have online presentations on the computer, etc. Questions are asked, information is looked up, or other information is provided that isn't provided in the first place for the hearing. So it's not a slight in any way with Mr. Pontanilla or anything of that nature. It's just the information for the hearing is meant to be included in the report that's provided.
Okay, Mr. Pontanilla, your reply on that point?
Mr. Chair, I'll defer to you if you feel that calculating numbers provided in the brief are considered new evidence, or if that's simply just looking at the evidence that's provided. I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Okay, I guess the panel will need to confer on that. So we will take a short break for the panel to confer on that.
To be clear, I have no huge objection. It's the ongoing nature of it that is an issue, and I'm hopeful that the board will address it in a broader scale at some point so that these issues don't pop up. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we still need to briefly consider this. So we'll take a brief break for the panel to consider whether to permit the evidence on the net leases.
I'll take us offline, Mr. Chair.
All right, welcome back. Yeah, the board has considered Mr. Smith's objection, and although we do feel it's new evidence, at this point we've been kind of permitting similar sort of stuff previously, so we will allow it this time, but in the future, Mr. Assessor, can you show your work so we can see how the net rents would be uh, derived in that, and the applicant can potentially dispute the calculations?
Understood, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so let's conclude this part on netting out the rents.
Okay, I'm not sure where I had ended off here before my interruption.
The optical place.
Oh, okay. So that equaled out to $21.16 gross, and then I had it netted out to $13.75. And then the final one, the barber shop, we have a lease from 2021 to 26 for 525 square feet at $1,056.56, which equals out to $12,678.12 of annual rental value, which comes out to $24.15 gross, which I netted out to $15.70.
Okay.
And I believe that's my presentation. That takes me to the end. Thank you.
All right. Questions, Mr. Smith?
Yes, just a couple briefly. The evaluation for subject property here, again, this is all model driven.
Yes,
Okay, and this particular strip mall, built in 1976, it's in St. James, and the model has applied a cap rate of 7.55%.
correct.
Do we know what the reasoning, I guess, for that gap is? 7.55 here. We have property built in 1980 in St. Tel, 5.8 cap, and one in Elmwood, 1978 at a 6.7% cap. So just trying to understand how the model derives these. Was there something different about this one or those other ones?
As far as I'm aware, it's model driven.
Okay, so the model has a gap of 1.75% in cap rate between three properties that were built within 4 years of each other, I guess.
I'm not sure what you're referring to when you ask that.
Okay. Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Benner, any questions?
I'm not sure if my question is maybe along a similar thread, but in the for strip malls, the cap rate range is shown as being 5.6 to 6.75 for that 20 to 80th percentile. And this cap rate is a fair bit above that range. I'm just wondering if there's any explanation for that.
As I previously mentioned, size would be a factor that goes into a cap rate that's generated. We do have the neighborhood. It would be another factor that generates the cap rate that's model driven, and then the building being sort of recessed from the main street. That could also be a factor as to why the cap rate is 7.55%. You'll note if you look at the overhead view of the subject property that there is sort of a recessing in the way that it's laid out, so that also could be a factor.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Knight?
So this property was sold in March of 2021
That's correct.
for $1.7 million.
Well, it's a little difficult to get into that now. I'm not sure it would be considered new evidence.
Well, the sale is in your brief.
Yep, I can speak to it. It's just that I'm not sure if that's going to come up again, but if you want me to speak to it, I can. I did some work, and yes, it does seem to be a verified sale. The sale price of 1.7 million varied from what was declared of $1,650,000. This was an arm's length open market sale. There were no other items included, and there wasn't an appraisal. And the condition was listed as average.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, I've got, I guess, a bit of a more mundane question. On your page 9, I guess it is, you show initially a total potential rent of 121,922, but then a couple of lines down, that is listed as 122,017 cents. What's the difference?
Yeah, I noticed that as well when the brief, actually, I noticed it after we had exchanged, and then I was reviewing the details of the brief to see. It's a little unclear myself as to where that difference would have came from, because if you do the math and you calculate based on what the income stream is, it does equal 121,922. My only thoughts that I could have had is that maybe there's a characteristic that changed from the moment that the appeal went out in 2000 and when we sent the appeal out in June of this year, the value when it was sent out to be appealed, there might have been some change from when the value went out to when the value was returned. If the value was a lot higher and different, that would be more of a concern, but in this scenario, it's close enough between 121,922 and 122,017 that makes me think maybe there might have been an effective age adjustment or something small that was done, but I did notice it, and I can't explain myself as well where that would have came from.
Okay, but if we follow that 121 figure down, we will arrive at a value of 1,452,000.
Okay, yep. I haven't done the math on it. It's new evidence, so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. You can begin.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll address the sale of the property to start with, as that will inevitably be an issue. We look at ownership of the property. Again, we're looking at Lakewood Lab Inc. as the owner of the property. This is a business owner that owns one other property that they are resident in. And this is their sole investment property that they purchased, as noted in the city's material. It sold in March of 2021, which is indicated as $1.7 million. But did not, it's not actually the true transaction value. The addenda material of my brief includes the income and expense questionnaire, or rather the property sale questionnaire, the last 2 pages of my brief there. I think Roddy's already referred to this. So the actual sale amount was $1,650,000. Yes, it was an open market transaction. No, they did not have the income and expense available to them when they purchased the property, and there was no appraisal done. So we have an investor that is again unsophisticated, doesn't have the details of the property, and made the acquisition of it as stated in the income, or rather the property sale questionnaire, not based on full detail, obviously. So was it an open market? Sure it was. Do people overpay for properties? Absolutely they do. I have a number of clients that have the same situation, as do others. I'm sure we're all well aware that the market is imperfect and people do pay what they pay. So in any case, that's the background with regard to the sale. The subject property itself. So we are looking at, and I do have a slight adjustment in my value here. Again, I had this was actually a typo in my spreadsheet, and I will own up to the error in what was included. We adjusted our vacancy rate from 6% to 4% in our valuation, which makes a slight overall change to the value, but we'll cover that on the summary of the property. So let's get into the property itself. So 3065 Ness, C2 zoning. built in 1976, and a leasable area of just under 11,000 square feet. So my point in asking my earlier question with regard to the modeling and the resultant capitalization rates is we have three different strip malls here, essentially. One, a two-story one in Elmwood, built in 1978, one in St. Patel, built in 1980, and one in St. James on Ness, built in 1976. And our cap rates range from 5.8% to 6.7% up to 7.55%. Wildly different modeling for properties that are of a similar age. Now, age is not everything. You do obviously have to look at location and all the other factors that come into it. But it does seem to indicate that there are some issues with the modeling with regard to capitalization rate. So let's get into the subject property photos on page 4 and on to page 5. Interiors, as you can see, of some of the units. There is a pet care place, and you can see frontage on the bottom of page number 8. The site itself, as Roddy had referred to, is shown on page 9 with the on-site office building that doesn't form part of the subject property on the left-hand side of that photo on page number 9. And the property location on page number 10. So this is obviously on Ness Avenue, well into the St. James area. The sale we've dealt with, so we can skip forward into the valuation. Now, the income and expense information is provided on the first page of my addenda. So what I did with regard to the gross rental rates is look at the expenses included, make any adjustments that were necessary, and then deduct that per square foot amount from the gross rate in order to end up at the net rental rate that we have there. So when we look at the income and expense, again, on that first page of the addenda, which will be your page 21, the item that jumps out is maintenance and repair at $96,698. That's a very significant amount of repair and maintenance, well above the norm. Obviously, some particularly expensive repair that had to occur in that particular year. That's not normal. We can't include that as a normal expense. So what I did was deduct the maintenance and repair amount and then add on a more typical $2 per square foot in costs for maintenance and repair in arriving at the total expenses that I deducted from the gross rental rate to arrive at the net rental rate for the subject property. Subject property operates on a gross rental basis, the same as the one on Nairn Avenue. So we've done the calculations as shown on page 13 in order to arrive at the net rates that the property generates. So as you can see in the chart on page 13, ranges from, well, we have 855 for the first one. You can see what each of the individual ones result in. And we've applied a net rental rate of $14 per square foot, possibly optimistic, but $14 per square foot to the two vacancies for the subject property, that being 1,900 square feet and 1,500 square feet. If you look at the resultant annual income, $107,908, averages out to $10.02 per square foot with regard to the rental rates. Now, that's what they're actually receiving, based on, of course, an adjustment to the expenses for the property. So are those appropriate rental rates? Well, let's skip forward to page 14 and look at the retail comparables that we've provided. I didn't actually ask this question of the city, but I would note that I think the first 8 comparables provided by the city were not in the identical St. James area as the subject property. They were on Roblin, which is obviously in Charleswood. So are all of my properties in the St. James area? No, they're not. The point again is to provide a framework to determine whether the rental rates for the subject property are appropriate or not. So that is what we've done. You can see the rental rates, rental rate comps provided. They're all of that generally all of that size in the 1,000 to 3,000 square foot range of a typical retail rental unit. Obviously, the first one is significantly larger that we can probably not put a lot of weight on. And these are all well-located strip malls throughout the city on main thoroughfares or tributaries such as similar to Ness. We have Pembina Highway, Osborne, Main Street, St. Mary's, St. Anne's, Provencher, etc. So you can see the comparability in that way. If we look at the most recent transactions, ignoring perhaps the first one, we look at number 6, 1560 Main, 2845 square feet. We have 2020 lease for 6-year term at $10.50 a square foot. Jumping down to number 8, 836 St. Mary's, 2022, $14 per square foot for a 5-year term, just under 1,300 square feet. 2 at 121 St. Anne's, 2022, which we've just covered, I believe. No, that was 145 rather. 2022 lease for 1,725 square feet, $10.97 a square foot. The next one, same property, 1,708 square feet, 2022 lease for 3 years, $13.50 a square foot. Same time frame in terms of the age of the property. So you can see that generally it's pointing towards the net resultant rental rates for the property being supported by the market. So we have used the in-place net rental rates in producing our market value. Skip forward to page 15. Very significant vacancy in the subject property. As of the valuation date, we had 2 vacancies totaling 3,400 square feet, which equates to 32% vacancy for the subject property. Obviously, you can't base a market value on that. That would be inappropriate. Initially, I had applied a vacancy rate of 6% in my analysis. However, consistent with what I've done on the other property, I have applied a vacancy rate, or rather deferred to the vacancy rate of 4% that the city has used, which is supported by the market data, and made accommodation for that in the capitalization rate that's selected for the property. The expense allowance we've discussed, as we have the shortfall, they are not in dispute, 5% and $9 per square foot, or rather I haven't changed them from my earlier presentation. And our capitalization rate information remains the same. So if you recall, if you go back to our property on Nairn Avenue, we had a vacancy rate of 37% for that particular property, chronic vacancy. Subject property here has a vacancy rate of 32% as of the valuation date. And from what I understand, the unit behind the office is a challenge to lease, or rather the units back there. So it is impeded by that aspect. Again, we've applied pretty relatively high in my estimation, net rental rate of $14 per square foot to those units in arriving at our net operating income. So capitalization rate, page 17, all of the information remains identical. What I will at this time, I guess, point out is if we look at the city of Winnipeg's capitalization rate chart, all of the market participants differ on the low end from the city of Winnipeg.
Mr. Smith, if I can interject here, the cap rate doesn't seem to be in dispute, so can we kind of move on from there?
We can, as long as the overall scope of the capitalization rate in relation to the three properties that we're looking at is taken into account. So I have made an adjustment to what I would typically apply to this property and used 7.55% in my valuation. That takes into account the significant vacancy, the challenges in leasing it, the rental rates achieved, the gross rental regime that they're operating under versus a net rental rate situation. All of these things are taken into account, and we apply a cap rate of 7.55%. Now, what I was referring to with regard to the City of Winnipeg's cap rate chart is that if you look at all of the information from the market participants, they all range between a low of 6% and a high of 7.5%, depending on category. 6 to 7 in most cases, 6.5 to 7.5 for strip malls, etc. for Cushman Wakefield. So all of the market participants are pointing towards capitalization rates in those ranges. The city differs in certain circumstances, and certainly at the low end of the range, which is what I wanted to get across. So let's skip forward to my page number 18. I'll make the adjustment that was originally intended, which is of course an upward adjustment. So the summary is on page 18 there. 107,908 in potential rental income. I have adjusted the vacancy to 4%, which gives you a vacancy allowance of $4,316 and an effective gross income of $103,592.
Mr. Chair, apologies, Mr. Chair, can I just interject? I'm not really sure where Mr. Smith is coming up with this information. Is this new information that's being presented to the board? I can't see his income stream here.
He's moving closer towards your valuation by using a lower vacancy rate. So
okay, but is it new information that is being presented? I'm unsure of the.
It's new information. He's been correcting his calculation.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make a point.
So this was originally intended to be done in this particular fashion, but I see that it didn't go out in that manner, so I'm making the appropriate correction, and it is indeed upward, so I don't think we have an issue in that regard.
No.
All of the information is present. I'm simply making a correction to it.
6% to 4% vacancy, that's upward? I'm unsure. I'm not following the logic.
Let's not get
the overall
involved.
Market value is the upward.
Okay, can I just interject here? We're splitting some hairs. Mr. Smith is moving closer towards your valuation, and that's the end of the matter. Now the new value will be $1,252,000.
Yes, that's correct. I can run through each of the changes if you need them, but yeah, the resultant market value is $1,252,000 as Mr. Chair has referred to.
Can I just have the new NOI, please?
Yeah, the new NOI is $94,535.
Thank you.
And I believe that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Pontanilla?
Yes, I do have a few questions. So heading back to the rental information that he had provided, I guess we went over the comparables not being in near to the subject property. Are any of these comparables under 1,000 square feet that are being shown?
No, I think it states quite clearly what the areas of them are. The
Okay,
smallest one
so
being
we have nothing under
1,023 square feet.
1,000 square feet. Okay. And then I did want to address what he had spoken about earlier with my comparables not being near the subject property, just to be able to, it was
Yes,
brought up.
he
The
did bring
comparables
it.
that I had used were from the same market region. The same market region has is that we have designated for the subject property, which has similar population density and infrastructure. We have a designation for market regions, and that's why I use those comparables. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And then, so Mr. Smith, getting back to page, what's your page on cap rates? Page 17. I'll give you a minute to get there.
Yeah.
So we've established that we don't have any sizes associated or effective years built with the information provided. So can I ask you, what is the range of the cap rates that you have there? If you look at your table, what's the range of cap rates?
Well, the range of our cap rates is 6.3% on the low end up to 8.9%. But for the most part, they fall within that 6.5 to 7.5 range, 6.3 to 7.5, frankly. So
Okay.
that's the general range.
And are your cap rates, are they not all strip malls or?
They are also indeed strip malls. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then how come that, so why would the cap rates not be homogeneous then if they're all strip malls? Should they not all be the same cap rates then?
So, no, certainly not. It depends on the particular property that you're looking at, and the investment stream that is resultant from that. And obviously that's what produces the capitalization rates that we're looking at. So just to be clear and to answer your real question, is there variability in capitalization rates? Absolutely, there's variability in capitalization rates depending on the quality of the investment. What I'm pointing out is that for a model that has particular parameters, that being size, location, age, et cetera, to have 1.7% variability between St. Vital and St. James for a structure that's 2 years different is problematic.
If I can just interject here once again, we're dealing with the cap rate on this property, and we've dealt with the cap rates on the previous properties already. So just confine yourselves to the cap rate on this property.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was only bringing it up because it was brought up in the presentation. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Knight, any questions?
So when you listed all those rental properties, 227 Henderson down to 353 Provencher, did you happen to add up the rent totals and figure out the average rent for all of those?
No, I wouldn't do that. That's not the purpose of it. It's to help frame it. We're not looking at an average. We're looking at how do those individual comparables compare to the subject property. So that's really what I'm doing.
So how do those properties compare to the subject property when they're not in that area?
So area isn't everything. And I do take your point. Obviously, there's been an awful lot of focus today on area. Such as Roblin versus Ness, but in any case, let's have a look at our property and its location. So we have, I think, a map of this shown on page number 10. So we're looking at Ness west of Sturgeon. It's kind of a location in the community, it's on Ness, which is a thoroughfare. It's like a secondary thoroughfare, essentially. It's not Portage Avenue or Pembina Highway or anything of that nature, right? So it's a little bit inferior to properties that are considered more main thoroughfares in that regard. From a locational aspect. So let's look at what are the comps that we have. Well, we have 3096 Pembina Highway. That is further out Pembina Highway into the Fort Richmond area, certainly a quality area. Pardon me, 539 Osborne is South Osborne before the bridge. 1875 Pembina is in the after I believe that's just after the railroad underpass. So again, certainly a good location, very high traffic area, which is good for retail. 271 Grassy, not as great a location in terms of being surrounded by density of residences, etc. It's on the corner of Lachapelle, obviously very high traffic, but somewhat removed. 1560 Main, obviously Grassy, St. Mary's and St. Anne's. These are both located prior to the Fermor interchange, so well located in the St. Vital area. 470 River is right in the heart of Osborne Village. And 353 Provencher is the strip center on the north side of Provencher in the heart of St. Boniface. So those are the locations that you're looking at. And our exercise, of course, is to look at those comparables in comparison to the subject property and draw the appropriate conclusions as to whether the in-place rental rates net would be appropriate or not. So that's what we've done.
So just to compare to the other two properties we heard, you've used the same properties pretty much each time for these comparables, but wouldn't you rather pick properties that were in the area, or you don't have information on those?
So what I would love to do each and every time I come here is have capitalization rates for properties in the immediate area that are comparable in size and age and location that sold, just before valuation date. That's what we'd all love to do. Same for lease rates. The issue essentially is having access to that information. Obviously, we do a very significant amount of research to collect the data that we do. We represent the clients that we have and have significant data, but we don't have everything.
Okay.
The area on Ness as well is not heavily commercial, I guess, is one other aspect. There are places out there, there's no question, but nobody has all the information, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Ms. Penner, any questions?
I did have a question in relation to the vacancy. You mentioned that this property has a bit of a higher level of vacancy due to the visibility or issue caused by the building in front. I'm just wondering if that capital expenditure would have anything to do with the vacancy, if there were some issues with the building that had to be addressed to get it fully occupied.
No, it's not specific to the vacant units. Again, I think I'd mentioned earlier, typically investment into vacant units occurs once you've signed the lease document with the tenant, so that you can build it out to their spec if they only need a portion of the space or extra HVAC or restaurant equipment or whatever it might be, right?
I guess I just thought if there was, if you have a leaking roof, you can't really rent out the space until that issue is dealt with. So
yes, to my knowledge, there's not a roof issue.
And then I'm just curious as to how the adjusted lease rates relate to the market. So, when you have a net rental rate on one of the units for $2 compared to net rates $10 plus in the market. Are you able to speak to that differentiation? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Certainly can do that. And yes, it is the one rate on the low end. Absolutely, it's on the low end. So there's no question about that. What we're looking at is the overall rate that comes out of this essentially. So when we look at the resultant net rental rates, we have 855, 1107, slightly down at 628, obviously, and then we have 1369, 1668 for some that had higher TIs, etc. It balances out, and we've applied $14 a square foot to the vacant spaces as a net rental rate that we might see in that particular location. I'm not saying they will. That's what I've applied to it. That might be a bit optimistic, but the overall average comes to $10.02 per square foot.
Thank you for that explanation. That's all I had for questions.
Okay, and my questions have been asked and answered. So thank you very much on this property. We'll now move to 2539 Main. Let me just open the file. So I understand, Mr. Smith, that you're again requesting or will be requesting confirmation on this one.
That's correct.
Okay, so Mr. Pontanilla, can you first of all, Ms. Knight, how are things doing with your husband there?
He's on his way, so as soon as he gets here, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So 2539 Main Street, Mr. Pontanilla.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So up next, we have our last file of the day, 24-3146. The roll number is 0500 09 or 920-7900. The address is 2539 Main Street. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $2,938,000. This is also a strip mall. We have one building record associated, 6 premises, and it's a one-story building. Actual year built and effective year built are both 1991. The land area is 53,636 square feet and a total leasable area of 10,785 square feet. On page 2, I have the pad IV image of the subject property. Page 3, I have the pictometry overhead view of the subject property. And then on page 4, I have the north-facing view and west-facing view of the subject property. On page 5, I have included Google Street View images of the subject property with a 2021 map overlay. We have received requests for income and expense information, so that's okay. We have no sales history and no property leases showing. For comparables, I have included comparables that are all within the same market region as a subject property. Comparable sizes, leases from 2014 for the latest, oldest one, and then rents ranging from $14 up to $24 per square foot. We do have what I believe is 6 premises associated on the income stream. We have areas ranging from 893 square feet to just under 3,000 square feet. And then we have modeled rents generated ranging from $16.65 at the lower end up to $20.70 at the higher end. That does bring us to a total potential rent of $193,473 for 10,785 square feet. And once we run that through the income stream, we have a net operating income of $176,279, which is then capitalized at 6% to come up with a value of $2,938,000. On page 9, we have a summary of the information provided. Page 10, we have our cap rate information provided. Page 11 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then page 12, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense mailer information. And I believe that's everything for my presentation.
Okay, questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions.
Questions, Ms. Benner?
No questions for me, thank you.
Questions, Ms. Knight?
No, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Smith then.
We're simply looking for confirmation.
Okay, any questions on that, Mr. Pontemilla?
No questions, thank you.
Any questions from the panel on that?
No, sir.
No, thank you.
Okay, so it's still listed, 510 Sergeant. I take it there's a 15-1 on this, is there?
Yes.
All right, so then we've heard all the properties on today's docket, and so this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your capable presentations.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to take us offline, Mr. Chair.
Okay.